The morning mist clung to the gates of Buckingham Palace like a shroud of secrecy as Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews stepped out of her unmarked vehicle. She had been summoned at dawn by a cryptic phone call from the palace's head of security, Marcus Wellington. In her 15 years with Scotland Yard, Sarah had handled many sensitive cases, but nothing had prepared her for what awaited her behind those imposing iron gates. Marcus Wellington stood waiting in the grand entrance hall, his usually composed demeanor betraying signs of deep concern. His silver hair was disheveled, and dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept. The 60-year-old former military officer had served the royal family for over 2 decades, and Sarah had never seen him look so troubled. "Inspector Matthews, thank you for coming so quickly," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We have a situation that requires the utmost discretion. What I'm about to tell you cannot leave these walls under any circumstances." Sarah nodded, her detective instincts already heightened. The palace was known for its ability to handle scandals internally, so for them to call in outside help meant something serious had occurred. 3 months ago, during the preparation for the king's coronation ceremony, we discovered that several pieces from the crown jewels collection were missing, Marcus continued, leading her through ornate hallways lined with portraits of long-dead monarchs. Specifically, the St. Edward sapphire, the Black Prince's ruby, and, most importantly, the Cullinan II diamond from the imperial state crown. Sarah felt her breath catch. The crown jewels were among the most heavily guarded treasures in the world, protected by multiple layers of security, ancient traditions, and modern technology. For even one piece to go missing was unprecedented. "How is that possible?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. "I thought the crown jewels were under constant surveillance." Marcus paused at a heavy oak door marked private and turned to face her. "That's what makes this situation so extraordinary. There were no signs of forced entry, no security breaches, and no alarms triggered. The gems simply disappeared from their settings during routine maintenance. They entered a small, windowless office filled with monitors showing security feeds from throughout the palace. Marcus activated a screen displaying the crown jewels chamber, where the priceless artifacts sat in their bulletproof cases under bright lights. "The maintenance work is performed by only 3 people in the entire world," Marcus explained. "Master jeweler Edmund Hartley, who has served the crown for 30 years, his assistant Rebecca Chen, and the keeper of the royal collection, Lord Pemberton. All 3 have been thoroughly investigated and cleared of any wrongdoing." Sarah studied the security footage, noting the precise choreography of the maintenance routine. Each person's movements were tracked and recorded from multiple angles. "What about palace staff who have access to the area?" "The list is very short," Marcus replied, pulling up a document on his tablet. "Only senior members of the royal household, heads of security, and, of course, the immediate royal family have authorized access to that level of the Tower of London where the crown jewels are housed." The weight of the implications settled on Sarah like a heavy blanket. If the investigation had cleared all the obvious suspects, and there were no signs of external theft, then the disappearance pointed to someone within the royal family itself or their most trusted inner circle. "Who else knows about this?" Sarah asked. "Besides the 3 jewelers, myself, and now you, only 5 people are aware of the theft," Marcus said grimly. "The King, Queen Camilla, Prince William, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and the Prime Minister. We've managed to keep it completely secret by using replica stones for all public appearances." Sarah walked to the window overlooking the palace courtyard, where tourists gathered hoping for a glimpse of royalty. "Why call me in now? What's changed?" Marcus hesitated, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. "Yesterday, we received credible intelligence that suggests the missing diamonds might be hidden somewhere within the palace grounds. Our source indicated that they never left the building." "What kind of source?" "A palace servant who claims to have witnessed suspicious behavior but was too frightened to come forward until now. The servant saw someone moving through restricted areas late at night, carrying what appeared to be a small jewelry case." Sarah felt the familiar tingle of a breakthrough. Did this witness identify who they saw? Marcus's face grew even more troubled. "That's the problem, Inspector. The description matches someone very close to the royal family. Someone whose involvement would create a constitutional crisis if it became public knowledge. Before Sarah could respond, Marcus's radio crackled to life. "Sir, we have a situation in the East Wing. Royal Guard Thompson is requesting immediate backup for a security matter involving Her Majesty Queen Camilla's personal quarters." Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances before hurrying through the palace corridors toward the East Wing. As they walked briskly past priceless paintings and ancient tapestries, Marcus explained the layout of the royal private quarters. "The East Wing houses the personal apartments of senior royals," he said, slightly out of breath. "Each apartment is considered private territory, and even security personnel require specific authorization to enter." They arrived to find Royal Guard James Thompson, a nervous-looking man in his 30s, standing outside an ornate door marked with Queen Camilla's royal cipher. Two other guards flanked him, their expressions tense. "Report, Thompson," Marcus commanded. Thompson stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable. "Sir, I was conducting routine security rounds when I heard unusual sounds coming from Her Majesty's private study. Tapping sounds, like someone moving furniture or searching through storage. Is Her Majesty in residence?" "No, sir. She departed for her engagement at the Children's Hospital an hour ago and isn't expected back until evening." Marcus frowned. Queen Camilla's schedule was meticulously planned and communicated to all relevant security personnel. No one should be in her private quarters during her absence. "Did you investigate the sounds?" Sarah asked Thompson. "I knocked and announced my presence, but the sounds stopped immediately. When I used my master key to check the room, I found it empty, but there were clear signs that someone had been searching through her personal belongings." Marcus made a quick decision. "Inspector Matthews and I will examine the scene. Thompson, you and the others secure the perimeter and ensure no one else enters this area." The three men stepped aside as Marcus and Sarah entered Queen Camilla's private study. The room was elegant but comfortable, with personal photographs, books, and mementos scattered throughout. However, it was immediately apparent that someone had been conducting a thorough search. Books had been pulled from shelves and replaced haphazardly. Desk drawers were slightly ajar, their contents disturbed. Most tellingly, a large antique trunk in the corner of the room sat slightly askew, its ornate brass locks showing fresh scratches. "Someone was looking for something specific," Sarah observed, pulling on latex gloves and approaching the trunk. "And they were in a hurry." Marcus stood guard by the door while Sarah examined the trunk more closely. It was clearly an antique, probably dating back over a century, with Queen Camilla's personal monogram engraved on the brass nameplate. "This trunk has been opened recently," Sarah said, pointing to the scratches around the locks. "See these marks? They're fresh, probably made within the last few hours." "Should we open it?" Marcus asked, clearly struggling with the protocol of investigating a senior royal's personal property. Sarah looked at him seriously. "Marcus, if this case is as important as you've indicated, and if there's a possibility that missing crown jewels worth £50 million are involved, then yes, we need to examine everything." With careful precision, Sarah opened the antique trunk. Inside, they found layers of carefully preserved items. Old photographs, letters, jewelry boxes, and various personal mementos spanning decades. But as Sarah lifted out the top layer of items, Marcus drew in a sharp breath. At the bottom of the trunk, wrapped in a black velvet cloth, lay a collection of loose gemstones that caught the light with unmistakable brilliance. Even to Sarah's untrained eye, the stones appeared to be of exceptional quality and size. "My God!" Marcus whispered, leaning closer. "Those look like—" Sarah carefully lifted the velvet cloth, revealing 3 magnificent gemstones. A deep blue sapphire, a dark red ruby, and a diamond of extraordinary size and clarity. Even though she wasn't a jewelry expert, the stone's exceptional quality was undeniable. "We need to get these authenticated immediately," Sarah said, her heart racing. "If these are what I think they are, We've just solved the mystery of the missing crown jewels. Marcus activated his secure radio. This is Wellington. I need Master Jeweler Hartley to report to the East Wing immediately for an urgent authentication. Maximum security protocol. As they waited for the jeweler's arrival, Sarah photographed the scene extensively, documenting the exact position of every item in the trunk. The discovery raised far more questions than it answered, but one thing was becoming terrifyingly clear. The missing crown jewels had been hidden in Queen Camilla's private quarters. Marcus, Sarah said quietly, when Queen Camilla returns this evening, someone is going to have to ask her some very difficult questions. The security chief nodded grimly, understanding the magnitude of what they had uncovered. Within the next few hours, they would either clear the queen consort of any involvement or potentially expose the most damaging royal scandal in centuries. The sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor signaled the arrival of Master Jeweler Hartley, and, with him, the beginning of an investigation that would shake the very foundations of the British monarchy. As Sarah looked down at the sparkling gems in the trunk, she couldn't shake the feeling that this discovery was only the beginning of a much larger and more complicated story. Master Jeweler Edmund Hartley arrived at Queen Camilla's study within minutes, carrying his specialized equipment case and wearing an expression of barely contained anxiety. The 70-year-old craftsman had dedicated his entire career to serving the crown, and his weathered hands had touched some of the most precious gems in human history. As he entered the room and saw the stones laid out on the velvet cloth, his face went completely pale. "Dear Lord," he whispered, setting down his case with trembling hands. "Where did you find these?" Sarah gestured toward the open trunk. "Hidden at the bottom, wrapped in this cloth. We need you to confirm whether these are the missing pieces from the crown jewels." Hartley approached the stones with the reverence of someone entering a sacred space. He carefully put on his jeweler's loupe and picked up the first stone, the magnificent blue sapphire. As he examined it under his portable magnifying light, his breathing became noticeably heavier. "This is definitely the St. Edward sapphire," he confirmed after several minutes of intense examination. "See this particular inclusion pattern here?" He pointed to tiny imperfections visible only under magnification. "It's like a fingerprint. I've worked with this stone dozens of times during maintenance and restoration. There's absolutely no doubt." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "And the others?" Hartley moved to the ruby next, his examination just as thorough. "The Black Prince's ruby. Again, unmistakable. This particular stone has a unique internal structure that I could identify in complete darkness." He paused, clearly struggling with the implications. "These stones have been in the Crown Jewels collection for over 600 years. Finally, he turned his attention to the massive diamond. This examination took longer, as Hartley used multiple tools to verify the stone's authenticity. When he finally looked up, his face was ashen. "The Cullinan II diamond," he said simply. "Part of the largest diamond ever found, gifted to King Edward VII in 1907. Inspector Matthews, you've discovered the missing crown jewels." Sarah felt a mixture of triumph and dread. While solving the mystery of the missing gems was a significant breakthrough, the location of their discovery created enormous complications. "Mr. Hartley, in your professional opinion, how long have these stones been removed from their settings?" "Based on the condition of the settings when I last examined them 3 months ago, I would estimate these stones were removed sometime in the past 4 to 6 months, Hartley replied, carefully rewrapping the gems. The removal was expertly done. Whoever took them knew exactly what they were doing. Marcus stepped closer to the window, his mind racing through the implications. "Edmund, who besides yourself and your team has the knowledge and skill to remove these stones without damaging them or their settings?" "The list is very short," Hartley replied gravely. "Perhaps a dozen master jewelers worldwide have the expertise, and most of them are well known to us. But, more importantly, the person would need intimate knowledge of the crown jewel security protocols and maintenance schedules." Sarah was taking detailed notes, building a timeline in her mind. "What about access to the tools required for this kind of work?" The specialized tools needed are kept in a secure workshop within the Tower of London, Hartley explained. Access requires multiple authorizations and is logged every time someone enters or leaves. Who has that level of access? Sarah pressed. Myself, my assistant Rebecca Chin, Lord Pemberton as keeper of the royal collection, and Hartley hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with where the conversation was heading. And who else, Mr. Hartley? Senior members of the royal family have access for special occasions or personal requests, he admitted reluctantly. It's a tradition dating back centuries. Members of the immediate royal family can request private viewings or fittings with the crown jewels. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Sarah looked around at Queen Camilla's personal study, taking in the elegant furnishings and personal photographs. Her eyes stopped on a particular image on the desk. Queen Camilla wearing the imperial state crown during a formal ceremony, the Cullinan II diamond prominently displayed in the front of the crown. Mr. Hartley, Sarah said slowly, has Queen Camilla ever requested private access to the crown jewels? Hartley shifted uncomfortably. Her Majesty has made several requests over the past year for private consultations regarding upcoming ceremonial occasions. It's quite normal for royals to want to familiarize themselves with the pieces they'll be wearing. How many requests and when? I would need to check the official logs, but from memory, perhaps 4 or 5 occasions since last autumn. The most recent was about 6 weeks ago. Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances. The timeline was beginning to align in a troubling way. Was she ever alone with the crown jewels during these visits? Absolutely not, Hartley replied firmly. Protocol requires that either myself or Lord Pemberton be present at all times. The jewels are never left unattended with anyone, regardless of their position. But, theoretically, Sarah continued, if someone with Queen Camilla's level of access wanted to take the stones, how might they accomplish it? Hartley considered this carefully. They would need to create a distraction during a maintenance session or find a way to access the storage areas during off-hours. The security is extraordinary, but it's designed primarily to prevent external threats, not internal ones. Marcus's radio crackled again. Sir, we have another development. Guard Thompson reports that he's found additional evidence in the corridor outside Her Majesty's apartments. What kind of evidence? Marcus responded. Small fragments of what appear to be jewelry tools, and traces of metallic dust that might be from jewelry work. Sarah felt the pieces of the puzzle starting to come together, but the picture they were forming was deeply disturbing. Marcus, I need to examine Queen Camilla's schedule for the past 6 months. Every appointment, every engagement, every time she was in the palace. I can arrange that, but Inspector, you must understand the sensitive nature of what we're discussing. If word of this investigation leaks before we have absolute proof. I understand, Sarah replied. But if Queen Camilla is involved in the theft of the crown jewels, we need to know before she has an opportunity to dispose of evidence or flee. Hartley began packing his equipment, his movements slow and deliberate. Inspector, I must tell you something else. 2 weeks ago, I received an unusual request from someone claiming to represent a private collector interested in acquiring gems similar to those in the crown jewels collection. Sarah's attention snapped to him immediately. What kind of request? They wanted detailed specifications, including size, clarity, and cut information for stones matching the missing pieces. I refused, of course, but the timing now seems significant. Did they identify themselves? The inquiry came through an intermediary, a London art dealer named Victoria Ashworth. She claimed her client wished to remain anonymous but was prepared to pay extraordinary sums for the right stones. Marcus pulled out his phone and began typing. I'm running a background check on this Ashworth woman immediately. While Marcus worked, Sarah continued her questioning. Mr. Hartley, in your professional opinion, what would be the motive for stealing these particular stones? They're impossibly famous and could never be sold openly. That's what makes this so puzzling, Hartley admitted. These stones are essentially priceless because of their historical significance, but They're also unsellable because they're so recognizable. However, there are private collectors who would pay enormous sums simply to own them, regardless of whether they could display them publicly. How enormous? Conservatively, 50 to 75 million pounds. Possibly more to the right collector. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. That kind of money was certainly a motive for theft, even for someone already wealthy. But it still didn't explain how the stones had ended up in Queen Camilla's personal trunk. Marcus looked up from his phone. Victoria Ashworth has an interesting history. She's a high-end art dealer with connections to several wealthy international collectors. She's also been flagged by Interpol for suspected involvement in the illegal antiquities trade. Any connection to the royal family? Not officially, but she's attended several palace charitable events over the past 2 years. She would have had opportunities to observe palace security and possibly make contact with royal staff. Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the palace gardens where tourists continued their visits, unaware of the drama unfolding inside. We need to speak with Queen Camilla immediately. The evidence is circumstantial, but it's building toward a clear pattern. She's scheduled to return from her hospital engagement within the hour, Marcus said. But, Inspector, I must emphasize again the delicate nature of this situation. We're talking about questioning the Queen Consort of England about theft of the crown jewels. I understand the gravity, Sarah replied, but consider the alternative. If Queen Camilla is guilty and we delay, she could dispose of evidence, warn accomplices, or even flee the country. If she's innocent, then she'll want to help us find out who planted evidence in her private quarters. Hartley finished securing the recovered crown jewels in a specially designed transport case. These need to return to secure storage immediately. I'll also prepare detailed documentation of their condition to help determine exactly when they were removed from their settings. As Hartley prepared to leave, Sarah had one more question. In your experience, what would be the most likely next step for someone who had stolen these stones? If they intended to sell them, they would need to have buyers lined up in advance, Hartley replied. Stones of this caliber don't sit around waiting for buyers. The theft would have been planned with specific end purchasers already identified. After Hartley left with the recovered jewels, Sarah and Marcus remained in Queen Camilla's study, both lost in their thoughts. The room felt charged with tension as they waited for the Queen Consort's return. Marcus, Sarah said finally, I need you to be completely honest with me. In your professional assessment, is Queen Camilla capable of orchestrating something like this? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photographs on Camilla's desk. Inspector, in my 20 years protecting the royal family, I've learned that people are capable of things you would never expect. The pressure of royal life, the constant scrutiny, the financial demands of maintaining their position. It changes people. That's not an answer. The Queen Consort has always been practical about financial matters, Marcus said carefully. She's very aware of the costs associated with royal life and has occasionally expressed concerns about maintaining her lifestyle if circumstances were to change. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of circumstances? The king is 25 years older than she is. There have been private discussions about what her financial situation would be if she were widowed. The royal family's wealth is largely tied to titles and properties that would pass to Prince William, not to her. Before Sarah could respond, they heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Marcus checked his watch. Queen Camilla was returning early from her engagement. In a few minutes, they would have to confront the Queen Consort of England with evidence that she might be involved in one of the most audacious thefts in British history. The sound of approaching voices grew closer, and Sarah realized that everything they had discovered so far might be only the beginning of a scandal that could destroy the monarchy itself. Queen Camilla entered the East Wing corridor with her typical composed stride, but Sarah immediately noticed something different about her demeanor. The Queen Consort's usually perfect composure showed subtle cracks. Her hands were clenched slightly, and her eyes darted nervously toward her study door where Marcus and Sarah stood waiting. Marcus, what's the meaning of this? Queen Camilla asked, her voice carrying the authority of her position but with an underlying tremor that betrayed her anxiety. "Why are there additional security personnel in my private quarters?" Marcus stepped forward with a respectful bow. "Your Majesty, I apologize for the intrusion, but we have a serious security matter that requires your immediate attention. This is Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews from Scotland Yard." Sarah offered a respectful nod but maintained her professional demeanor. In her years of police work, she had learned that treating suspects differently based on their social status was a dangerous mistake. Queen consort or not, Camilla would be questioned like any other person of interest. "Inspector Matthews," Queen Camilla acknowledged coolly. "I wasn't aware that Scotland Yard had business within the palace walls. Surely any security matters should be handled internally." "Under normal circumstances, yes, Your Majesty," Sarah replied. "However, we're investigating a theft of national treasures, and evidence has led us to your private study." The color drained from Camilla's face, though she maintained her regal posture. "I'm sure I don't understand what you're implying, Inspector." Marcus gestured toward the study door. "Your Majesty, perhaps we could discuss this matter privately. The evidence we've discovered requires your immediate explanation." Queen Camilla hesitated for a moment, her gaze moving between Marcus and Sarah before settling on the slightly open door of her study. "Very well, but I want my private secretary present for any official questioning." "I'm afraid that won't be possible at this stage," Sarah said firmly. "This is a criminal investigation, and we need to speak with you alone first." They entered the study, where the open trunk sat as evidence of the morning's discovery. Queen Camilla's reaction was immediate and telling. Her step faltered slightly when she saw the disturbed contents, and her hand moved unconsciously to her throat. A classic stress response Sarah had observed in countless interrogations. "Your Majesty," Marcus began, "this morning we discovered the missing crown jewels hidden in your personal trunk. We need you to explain how they came to be there." Queen Camilla moved to her desk chair and sat down slowly, her movements calculated and deliberate. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but Sarah noticed her hands trembling slightly as she folded them in her lap. "I have absolutely no knowledge of any crown jewels being in my possession," she said. "If you found something in my trunk, then someone placed it there without my knowledge or consent." Sarah stepped closer, pulling out her notebook. "Your Majesty, we have evidence that these stones were removed from the crown jewels collection approximately 4 to 6 months ago. During that time period, you made several requests for private access to the crown jewels. Can you explain those visits?" "Those visits were entirely legitimate," Camilla replied, her voice gaining strength. "I needed to familiarize myself with the ceremonial pieces I would be wearing during various state functions. Every member of the royal family has done the same throughout history. Were you ever alone with the crown jewels during those visits?" "Of course not. Protocol strictly forbids it, and I would never violate such important security measures." Marcus consulted his tablet. "Your Majesty, our records show that during your visit on March 15th, there was a brief period when Master Jeweler Hartley was called away to handle an emergency with another piece. You remained in the secure area for approximately 12 minutes without direct supervision." Queen Camilla's composure cracked slightly. "I don't recall the specific details of every visit, Marcus. If there was a brief period when Mr. Hartley stepped away, I certainly didn't take advantage of it in any inappropriate way." Sarah sensed an opening. "Your Majesty, we also have evidence that someone has been in contact with art dealer Victoria Ashworth about acquiring gems matching the description of the missing crown jewels. Are you familiar with Ms. Ashworth?" The question hit its mark. Camilla's face flushed, and she looked away from Sarah's direct gaze. "I may have encountered her at charitable events. I meet hundreds of people each month in my official capacity." "This would be more than a casual encounter," Sarah pressed. "We have phone records showing multiple calls between a number registered to your private office and Ms. Ashworth's gallery over the past 3 months." Queen Camilla stood up abruptly, moving to the window. For several moments, she stared out at the palace gardens in silence. When she turned back, there were tears in her eyes, but Her voice remained controlled. Inspector Matthews, do you have any idea what it's like to live under constant financial uncertainty? To know that everything you have could disappear if circumstances change. Sarah felt the shift in the conversation. The Queen Consort was preparing to reveal something significant. Please continue, Your Majesty. When I married Charles, I understood that I would never be fully accepted by the British public. I knew that my position would always be precarious, subject to the whims of public opinion and family politics. Camilla's voice grew stronger as she spoke. But what I didn't understand was how financially vulnerable my position would make me. Marcus looked confused. Your Majesty, surely your financial position is secure. Is it? Camilla turned to face him directly. Marcus, what happens to my income, my housing, my security if something happens to Charles? I'm not the mother of the heir to the throne. I have no guaranteed position in the succession. If Charles dies, I could find myself with a modest pension and nowhere to live except a grace and favor apartment. Sarah began to understand the potential motive. So you contacted Victoria Ashworth to explore your options? I contacted her to inquire about the potential value of certain jewelry pieces I own personally, Camilla said carefully. I wanted to understand my assets in case I ever needed to liquidate them. But that inquiry led to discussions about the crown jewels. Queen Camilla returned to her chair, her shoulders sagging slightly. Victoria mentioned that she knew collectors who would pay extraordinary amounts for historically significant pieces. She said that sometimes items were acquired through unofficial channels. Did you interpret that as an invitation to steal from the crown jewels collection? No. Camilla's response was sharp and immediate. I never agreed to any theft. I never removed those stones from their settings. And I certainly never gave anyone permission to hide stolen property in my private quarters. Sarah studied the Queen Consort's face carefully. Her training and experience told her that Camilla was telling the truth about not actually stealing the stones herself, but there were still significant gaps in her story. Your Majesty, if you didn't steal the stones, then who did? And why were they hidden in your trunk? Camilla was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with a decision. When she finally spoke, her words came slowly and carefully. I believe someone is trying to frame me for this theft. Who would want to frame you and why? Inspector, there are members of this family who have never accepted my marriage to Charles, who see me as an outsider and a threat to the monarchy's reputation. Camilla's voice grew bitter. If I were to be exposed in a scandal like this, it would justify their opposition and possibly force Charles to choose between the crown and his wife. Marcus leaned forward. Your Majesty, are you suggesting that another member of the royal family orchestrated this theft to discredit you? I'm suggesting that someone with intimate knowledge of palace security, access to the crown jewels, and the ability to enter my private quarters without suspicion has set me up to take the blame for this crime. Sarah felt the case becoming more complex by the minute. Do you have any evidence to support this theory? Queen Camilla hesitated again, then moved to her desk and opened the top drawer. She withdrew a small piece of paper and handed it to Sarah. I found this note slipped under my door 2 days ago. Sarah read the note aloud. Your past mistakes have consequences. The truth about your financial difficulties will soon become public unless you reconsider your position in this family. This sounds like blackmail, Sarah observed. Why didn't you report it? Because I couldn't be certain it wasn't referring to legitimate concerns about my past financial management, Camilla replied. I've made some investment mistakes over the years. Nothing criminal, but embarrassing for someone in my position. Marcus stood up and began pacing. Your Majesty, if someone is indeed trying to frame you, they would need detailed knowledge of your private communications with Victoria Ashworth, your access schedule to the crown jewels, and your personal security routines. Exactly, Camilla said. The list of people with that level of information is very short. Sarah closed her notebook and looked directly at Queen Camilla. Your Majesty, I need you to provide us with a complete list of everyone who has had access to your private quarters over the past 6 months. Staff, family members, friends, anyone who could have placed those stones in your trunk. I'll have my private secretary prepare that information immediately. I also need your permission to examine your financial records, phone logs, and email correspondence. If you're truly innocent, this information will help clear you. Queen Camilla nodded slowly. You have my complete cooperation, Inspector. I want to find out who did this as much as you do. As they prepared to leave the study, Sarah had one final question. Your Majesty, in your opinion, who in the royal family would be most motivated to see you disgraced? Camilla looked out the window again, her expression thoughtful and sad. Inspector, there are people in this family who have never forgiven me for my relationship with Charles, who believe that my presence diminishes the monarchy's moral authority. But I never thought any of them would go this far. Can you give me names? Queen Camilla met Sarah's eyes directly. Start your investigation with Prince William and Princess Catherine. They have the most to gain from my removal from the royal family, and they certainly have the access and knowledge necessary to orchestrate something like this. The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Sarah realized that what had started as a straightforward theft investigation was rapidly becoming a complex web of royal family politics, financial desperation, and potential conspiracy that reached the very highest levels of the British monarchy. As they left Queen Camilla's study, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they had only scratched the surface of a scandal that could ultimately destroy the royal family from within. The next morning brought a flurry of activity as Sarah expanded her investigation beyond the palace walls. Her first stop was Victoria Ashworth's gallery in an upscale area of London, where she hoped to uncover more details in the shadowy corridors of Buckingham Palace, where centuries of royal secrets lie buried beneath layers of tradition and protocol. One discovery would threaten to unravel the very foundation of the British monarchy. What began as a routine security check would expose a web of deception, hidden treasures, and family betrayals that reached the highest echelons of power. The missing Coronation diamonds, worth over £50 million and steeped in 800 years of royal history, had vanished without a trace. For months, the palace had maintained absolute silence, hoping the priceless gems would quietly resurface. But when a nervous royal guard made a decision that would change everything, the truth finally emerged from the most unexpected place. This is the story of how one woman's desperate attempt to protect a devastating secret led to the most shocking royal scandal in modern history. A tale of greed, family loyalty, and the dangerous lengths people will go to preserve their position in the world's most scrutinized family.